Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen, and family all around. You are listening to the Unmasked Agenda here on Rainier Avenue Radio. I am your friendly neighborhood agitator, Chris Cawthon, and yes, I did survive the sleep study. Kudos, if you know, you know. Anyway, I am happy to have a couple great guests on today to talk about something that I fiddle-faddled through before, but is nonetheless a serious conversation we need to have. Surveillance all across the city. Right now, advocates have been calling out our current mayor, albeit, yes, and, just for transparency's sake, friend of the show, and someone whom we've had on a show before, Mayor Wilson, for not sticking to the expectation and promise that she supposedly laid out during her campaign, which was that we would turn these surveillance cameras off. And to explore how people are holding them accountable, we are going to have on Xochitl Maykovich and Melissa Howard of the new group Our Seattle, which is a group of former campaign volunteers on the Wilson campaign who have knocked over 50,000 doors throughout the city and want to see the city that they felt that they were promised and the policies that voters all across the city voted for. And without further ado, Daniel, shall we bring them in? Hey, Xochitl, Melissa, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good as well. Thanks for having us.
You know what? Usually I would have like a Red Bull or something. So if I am a little less charismatic, a little less cantankerous, you'll forgive me. So actually, for transparency's sake, Melissa, I feel like we've run into each other, but Sochi, we work together IRL, and also, we've known each other for a number of years. So if I'm weak sauce with this, you can just be like, Cliff, come on, bro. Come on, bro. Like, I think you can do better than this.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Anyway, so why don't we just dive right in? So can you explain? I tried to capture what Our Seattle is and what the goals of your campaign are, but can you explain to the audience a little bit more about the campaign and how the group Our Seattle came about?
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Melissa?
Sure, I'll jump in, I guess. So I was a neighborhood captain for Katie Wilson's campaign. Sochi was our fearless leader as the field director. And, my role was to kind of organize other people to knock doors for the campaign. And, I think our Seattle really kind of started on Inauguration Day, really, because Katie herself said that it was imperative that, we hold her accountable, and that in order for, her to be able to stand up to, corporate interests, and that power, and the pressure that she's bound to get from that, we needed to be there to continue to hold her to account. And so, I think, that's kind of really where it all came about. We're just committed to holding to her to her promises, really.
Yeah, and I think basically when we started seeing the lack of action on surveillance, several of us who were involved in the campaign started talking, and we just realized that we needed to continue the organized energy and hold Katie accountable to what, to implementing the city that we worked hard for.
Absolutely.
House, another Our Seattle member, wrote a really great op-ed in the Seattle Times, which I feel like kind of kicked off this kind of movement. But I think we have plans to hold the mayor accountable for all of her promises. And, we're also excited to work with the mayor on things that, she campaigned on and her progressive agenda. So we just want to see, real progressive change and the change in, leadership and tactics that she campaigned on.
I think it's interesting. It's rare that you often have a lot of leftists and progressives say when they're elected, it's like, hey, we still need the movement to to push me to do these things. Because like you guys were saying that, Katie is dealing with a number of different constraints, a number of different actors, and as the mayor, she can't be as overtly radical as that maybe in her gut she wants to be, or she feels like she can't, at least. And for you guys, y'all are actually following through on that. I think it was maybe FDR that originated that saying, where it's like, if you want to see me do something, make me, right? That Katie Wilson had as a part of her campaign. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but puppy.
I just had another person bring that up to me earlier today, actually. So it's funny you mentioned that.
Right. And so one thing I just want to get square, because maybe this is a dumb question, but so right now your organization's focused on surveillance, but are there any other areas where you see Mayor Wilson falling short or not taking as decisive action as maybe she could?
Well, I can name one that I think is important, is that she left the person who was involved in homelessness in the mayor's office under Bruce Harrell. That person is overseeing homelessness operations still. And one of the things that she has full control over, the mayor, is that she changed the criteria for sweeps, right? But as far as I know, and from talking to people within the city, there's been no action to change how sweeps are done, how often they're done, where they're done. And so things are a lot of things are happening that are continual, like status quo. And it's just confusing, honestly.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I've heard that from other folks. And I'm kind of curious as to what your take is on, I know we're digressing a little bit, but what your take on the whole episode with her pausing the sweeps in Ballard, and then after a while going back and enacting the sweep, but with the promise, or at least if my memory is wrong, please let me know, that there was like a process to get folks into either shelter or refer them somewhere else. What was your take on that?
Well, I used to work at KCRHA, so I'm pretty familiar how UCP works and other things. And what I imagine happened is, because I know that they were like, we'll pause it and we'll try to find folks some housing, right? And my understanding is they basically called around and like just said, hey, provider, keep your unit open so we can put this person there. But that's not really a long-term real solution, because we have coordinated entry. And so that just means there was someone else who didn't get a unit, right? So just randomly like responding to a news story was the same type of thing that happened under Bruce Harrell. And then just continuing forward with the sweep without from one of the other things I remember during the campaign was a lot of conversation around using city land. So I'm not sure why didn't you find some city land and say, hey, maybe I understand it takes time to get some things set up like tiny homes, but why don't you like move to this place instead of staying here? Like there's other things that you could have done that would not have felt like a Bruce Harrell Part 2. But I, as someone who was on last year when I was working in KCRHA under the, situation of the mayor's office calling saying, hey, we got this really bad news story. We need you to do something right now, react right now. That was like, I felt like deja vu, honestly. So I don't know, Melissa, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, so I live very near that site that was like the subject of the news stories and the sweep. And it was on the like it was encroaching on the Burke-Gilman. So I understand like why people maybe were concerned about safety and things like that around it. I think, again, what Sochi said, you know, we really campaigned for the mayor to think creatively. And I think, why can't the city create actual zones or places where there are maybe services or, access to more, to at least connect people with more resources, that would be a better place, if they're going to say that this is a public safety issue and we can't have this encampment here. Like, can we come up with better, or do we just need to wait for all these shelter beds to be,
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, I definitely think, Sochi, something you alluded to earlier, like using public land and basically making camps livable as like a stopgap, and then having that be a link in the chain of a solution, like an actual like long-term strategy, makes a lot of sense. And Melissa, to the point you're bringing up, that there are other things that could be done, that we've seen work not just in this city, but we've seen work in other places, right? But there hasn't necessarily been a, a definitive solution as a lot of people would like to imagine in their minds, right? But also, Sochi, that sounded painful at KCRHA to. It's like, hey, here's bad news story. Do something about it. It's like, this is a systemic issue. Can't wave a magic wand.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe we could call it Magneto, and he can put up some of those, like, some of those, what do they call, shipping container homes. There we go. Right.
Yeah, that would be a step.
So, in that case, I know we already talked about this, but one of the just to kind of to maybe clarify it for our listeners, Mayor Wilson's platform was like mostly about affordability, but could you maybe explain a little bit as to why you think that she's gone in the other direction on surveillance? Because I was looking through a number of a number of her statements from the past, and she was definitely against expanding the surveillance program. Obviously, we all remember that. But it seems like she was saying, well, we will examine it and then decide where to go from there. But she wasn't for expanding it. So do you think in that regard, like maybe something else came up, or I don't know, what do you think?
Well, I'll say that, like, and I think that many of the volunteers would maybe would have a different framing on this, and I do as well. Like, you could look at Katie's statement, and she talked about following the city's surveillance advisory working group, around rejecting the proposals, not pausing to go look and think and whatnot. She talked about how these surveillance makes our neighbors more vulnerable. She brought up the Trump administration. I mean, a lot of the campaign was about Trump-proofing Seattle, right? And so I think that she's trying right now to say, oh, I was like, kind of okay with surveillance, but that's just nonsense. And
Right.
I think that she's really backtracking, honestly. And I think that a lot of it's just, to me, it just makes me think that she didn't have strong convictions on this to begin with. And that, because I have some pretty strong feelings and thoughts and convictions around surveillance, privacy, civil liberties, and there's very little I think the police could tell me in 3 months to get me to change my mind. And if they did get me to change my mind, I would be able to explain myself and point to a very specific data point or report or something if I did. And she has not. She is not able to explain why she's changed her mind. And so I actually just don't think she really cared about this that much to begin with. And I think it makes me concerned about everything else that she campaigned on. So I don't know, Melissa, what your thoughts are on that. But
yeah, I mean, I think while affordability was obviously a key, aspect of her platform, for me, I feel like it was even more broadly about just like change in leadership and substantive change in the city that, was community focused. And, one of the big things that really led me to the campaign was the fact that it was a people-powered campaign, and she wasn't backed by the big corporate donors that Bruce had. And I think, that's where I really hoped that we could see, some follow through in standing up to, corporate interests. And, particularly as I've learned more about this issue on surveillance and learned more about Axon, who, I feel like Mayor Wilson is saying that Axon is a much better option than Flock. And I don't agree at all. I mean, they both have their negatives, but Flock is, kind of a small little startup, and they have a ton of security vulnerabilities that are well documented. But Axon is really the behemoth corporate. I mean, fun fact, the CEO of Axon was actually the world's highest paid CEO in 2024 when the Trump administration was reelected. And, that's because he's paid in stock, and that stock went through the roof when Trump was elected because, this is the Project 2025 agenda is to surveil the population. And, Axon has huge contracts with ICE and CBP. I've seen reports of 126 or 7 million to I've also seen 300 million thrown out there, but there's, there is, a tie, not to mention that the former ICE director, I can't recall his name, but there's a former ICE director on staff at Axon. So I think, there's clear connections that this is a violation of that Trump-proof Seattle platform for me.
So you actually both of you started to answer my next question. And also, was it Tom Holman? Because their website,
No, I think it's someone named, I think it's Ronald, I have it written down, Ronald Viteo.
Oh, okay. I know who you're talking about. Yeah. I was always I always giggled because I always thought Ronald, what was it, calling him Ronald McDonald, but or Ronald Mc civil rights violation. But actually, apropos of that, their website, if you go on to Axon's website, they are not shy about these ties. Sochi, as you know, we have to do research for our job, and I was actually gearing up before the show. I'm saying to myself, okay, I have a half an hour. Let me try to Google some stuff. Let me try to follow some breadcrumbs. I was able to stop at the grocery store, and they're like, oh yeah, we are definitely working with ICE. We're definitely working with CBP. Yes. Look at all of these brave, defenders of freedom on their website, right? So, in addition to the violation of Trump-proof, the Trump-proof Seattle platform, the both pledge, but also the energy and the image and also the necessity, or rather, and I should say the necessity of Trump-proofing Seattle, because we all see what's going on national level. I'm wondering, for those who might be apolitical at home, and both of you started to answer this, why should they care? Because when it comes to, unfortunately, when it comes to a lot of people in the community, they have kids, they're, trying to get to work every, to and fro every single day, they have lives. And for those of us that work in politics or, study politics or activists or follow policy in politics, there's like different understanding. But just for everyday people, why should they be very concerned about these cameras being all over the city?
Well, I can share a little bit about like a personal experience around like why I care about this surveillance. I mean, I guess I've always been concerned about privacy and things, but in 2018, I had the chance to train political organizers in Hungary. And so when I was going over there, they had to register me as like a foreign agent. And I kind of thought like that was like being registered like a lobbyist. No. What happened was as soon as I got off the plane, about to leave the airport, I got pulled over by armed police and they searched everything. I had a government minder that came to every meeting that I had, every training that I had. And I remember talking to some of the organizers and they talked about how they knew that their phones were tapped and that they were being followed and watched and all of these things. And the thing I kind of observed was that they were really just accepting that Orban, who's the president of Hungary, was going to be the president. They had very little hope. They did not really think that they could do much. And I have a clear memory of explaining how to do like an organizing campaign to these little old ladies, right? Mm-hmm. Little old ladies in this very, very rural village in Hungary. And there was the government minder who didn't even speak English. So there was the person I was there with was translating. And every time I'd say something, he'd be like, no, we can't say that. I'll say this instead. Like he was changing everything because of that person there. I remember, and this was all unfolding over, like a few weeks. And like, I remember going to the room that I was staying in. And I looked at in my room, it looked like things had been moved around and I thought my room had been searched. And I went to text a friend that I think my room got searched, but I stopped because I was like, I don't know if I can. Yeah. So I censored myself just because of the fear of the government watching. And at no point in that entire period did anyone from the Hungarian government tell me I can't do something. Mm-hmm. But being watched by an entity that can take away your liberty changes what you feel like you can do. And I know people bring up the Ring cameras and things like that. Now I think they're creepy and I would never use one. I've never given my DNA to a company. I've never used a fingerprint to open up my phone. None of that, nothing. Mm-hmm. But there is a difference between a private individual having a camera and the government having a camera, because the government can arrest me, right? And we live in a country where the government has arrested people, taken away their liberty, and shipped them out of the country without due process. So why would I want to give them tools to make it easier? And then you throw that into the fact that Axon is what, like the leading provider of police cameras. They have one of the biggest platforms of all of this type of surveillance and evidence. It's just like you don't want to give them tools to control you. And I think that people should be really concerned. So that's my thought.
And I think overall in Seattle, knocking at doors that, I marked even as I think they're going to lean Bruce, even at those doors, I had conversations about the concerns around the Trump administration and what might happen and how we need strong leadership locally to prevent, the worst from happening. And I think, Sochi's story makes me think about how we have people coming out to No Kings protests, or in some cases, a lot of people already don't feel safe going out to No Kings protests. We've heard of, people doing like more of like I decided to drive through the protest because I didn't feel safe being out in the crowd. That's another example of people policing, changing their behavior as a result of these technologies and the fear of, the very real fears of what the, federal government or even local police and other bad actors might do with this information. And then to kind of add on to Sochi's point about, the AI piece of it and just the real-time crime center, I think for me, I don't know, I think AI is becoming a real conversation of the moment, that there's a lot of people that are kind of fearful of what's to come. But I think especially when we look in the context of where we are today and all the threats and how quickly all of this is moving, I just don't think that moving forward with something so significant to all of our lives and with such, like it's a data security issue, really, to collect all of this data and then have it be controlled by a third party like Axon, who then also hosts it on third party servers that may be out of state. Like there's just so many points of failure in this system that it's definitely concerning. And I think we need to be very careful about what we're building and the infrastructure that we're building that can be taken that can be used to take advantage of, to control us.
For sure, by nefarious actors. We have seen that in our country's past of law enforcement, not necessarily locking someone up or even deporting them, because they've committed a crime, but instead locking them up, beating them, disappearing them, killing them, or even deporting them because of their political stances. And we have seen that. We've seen that a lot in many different examples of that in 20th century. Hell, many of the surviving Black Panthers in our community have told stories about how they were surveilled and how the federal government, in coordination with local and state governments, used or participated under the banner of COINTELPRO in order to target activists, including little old ladies, or the case of a friend of mine in Egypt that was dealing with being surveilled by the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces and the police, just democracy activists trying to lift all voices, right? But we are at the break time, so I do want to give a bit of a shout out to our Earth Day programming, because Earth deserves more than a day. And is now just 2 weeks away. And in that week of April 20th to 25th, we'll be bringing a whole week of environmental programming. And also you can still catch the Unmasked Agenda on our YouTube and Spotify accounts as well. And also, hey, if you have Venmo, why don't you throw a little coin Rainier Avenue Radio's way? Donate at Rainier Avenue Radio. That is at Rainier Avenue Radio on Venmo, or go online to donate at rainieravenuradio.world/donate. That is rainieravenuradio.world/donate. And we'll be right back.
Weekly at rainieravenuradio.world.
Buying a home isn't just a purchase,
It's a legacy move. Maybe you're just starting your home ownership journey, or maybe you're a homeowner who's fallen behind on your mortgage, property taxes, or HOA dues. Wherever you are on your path, Washington Home Ownership Resource Center connects you to trusted guidance every step of the way. Vetted resources, trusted referrals, real support. If homeownership is your goal or you're trying to protect the home you already have, don't face it alone. Visit homeownership-wa.org or call the Homeownership Hotline at 877-894-4663 today. The Washington Home Ownership Resource Center, educating and empowering future and current homeowners in Washington State.
Fellas, your mental health matters, and it's time we talked about it. Join us every Monday at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time on Rainier Avenue Radio for the Men's Mental Health Show. Real conversations, real stories, real tools to help you navigate life's challenges with strength and honesty. Whether you're tuning in from the car, the gym, or your couch, this is your space to breathe, learn, and grow. That's Mondays at 5:30 p.m. on Rainier Avenue Radio, where men's voices and men's wellness take center stage.
What do you get when culture, climate, and community collide? You get Earth Deserves More Than a Day. Rainier Avenue Radio and King County Parks screw down with a week of real talk, real people, and real solutions. This ain't your average Earth Day. Tune in and feel the energy, because the movement is now.
What's up, everyone? It's your girl, Queen Bree, inviting you to come join me on Clean Greens Living. Broadcasted Tuesdays, 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, live right here on Rainier Avenue Radio. On Clean Greens Living, we talk farming, community, and ways to being healthy. So come join me and let's discuss ways to create a healthier you and a healthier community. So my doctor told me to go online to check my test results, but I didn't know how to do that. Thankfully, I could turn to Link to Care WA for help. With Link to Care WA, I was able to learn how to use online health portals, use telehealth to talk to my doctor virtually, and manage my prescriptions online. I called their hotline and spoke to a real person who taught me the skills I needed. Call Link to Care WA at 866-757-1832 or visit linktocarewa.org.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio,
your community radio station.
Hello, everyone. We are back. And just in case you're tuning in for the first time, this is the Unmasked Agenda here on Rainier Avenue Radio. Your sometimes weekly, usually bi-weekly, but season 2 has been kind of special. We've been on a bit of a hot streak, if I may say so myself. So your ongoing slice of political commentary that meets pop culture analysis and, of course, my love of film and everything literary. So without further ado, let's bring back our guests, Xochitl Maykovich and Melissa Howard from Our Seattle. And we are just having a great conversation about why you should care about surveillance in our city and also why you should be against it. Because if they can lock up one of us, they can lock you up too for no reason whatsoever. And I know that was a very abridged version in comparison to the really thoughtful explanation y'all gave a second ago. But I do, just in the interest of time, want to move on to another question I had for y'all. So let's talk a little bit about where we're at right now, because this was something that was definitely expressed during the campaign, that the cameras would go off, that Katie Wilson, if elected, would not just study, not just assess and decide what to do later, but there was a very real impression, not just amongst the volunteers, but also amongst the public, that we would not be moving ahead with a mass surveillance program like it seems that we're heading towards right now. But first, I hate to play devil's advocate, but I do want to just clarify that right now, the security camera expansion was paused. And right now there's an audit being led by the NYU School Law Policing Project, which has come under some scrutiny after an article in the South Seattle Emerald highlighted that a former Seattle police chief was on their board and also a number of other conflicts of interest that might not make them a very reputable third party for the study. But still, there's an audit going on, and some cameras are remaining on. But with the bulk of it paused, do you think that might be a sign of hope or a sign that maybe pressure's working to sway the administration? What do y'all think?
I can, I guess, jump in of
Yeah.
Sochi actually led a webinar on Tuesday with the mayor. It was kind of it was in response to the letter that we obtained, 1,355 signatures, I believe, from the community.
Yes. Mhm.
Sign that.
Yeah.
So that webinar, I think, it followed the town hall that she also had. And I think we kind of just heard more of the same. I think we really haven't heard much in terms of her changing her attitude towards surveillance, or it doesn't sound like our kind of, we've tried to bring together, and I think actually I should plug that tomorrow we have a rally at City Hall at noon. And I think we're really excited about this rally because we've brought together so many different speakers to speak to this issue from their perspective. And I think that's key in this whole conversation, is actually centering it around the communities that are impacted. And, I think the mayor has referenced a lot of folks and communities and their opinions on surveillance, but and maybe even suggested that she wants to bring us together, but there's been no real effort to actually bridge that. I think we have spoken to a lot of people on the street, just trying to get them out to this rally, trying to gather signatures and things. And I'm not hearing as much of, this perspective that she's talking about. I think especially when you frame it around, the way that we're rolling this out, or the fact that, maybe she's paused it for now, but I think we want acknowledgement of the moment that we're in. She hasn't paused the fact that she's going to put the cameras up in the stadium, and she's referenced, the World Cup as the reason for that. And, what we're afraid of is we're going to use the World Cup, which is a one-time event, as a reason to constantly surveil the city even more. And I think, again, it's just, this moment is such a tenuous and kind of serious moment that we need to be really careful about our decisions. And while I think it's great that she wants to be informed by data, I think she needs to also bring the public along that journey. And we haven't seen that right now. It's kind of been the same talking points that we've heard thus far. And so if she can provide more of the information that she's basing her decisions on, or her resistance to change on, I think that would go a long way to at least start a little bit more of a productive conversation on this.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, it's really hard to take the audit seriously if you're still going to be using this surveillance on Tuesday in the webinar, which you can send it to YouTube. We just recorded it. She talked about how she...
Sorry to pause it. Can we raise? Okay, can you raise the volume on your mic? You cut out for 2 seconds while you were saying something.
Okay, so I don't know if this is better, but okay. The mayor said that she thinks that we probably do need surveillance in quote unquote high crime areas, right? So it's she's coming to these conclusions before she's even finished this audit. We asked, what data has the police shown you that, convinced you? She's like, I think there was some sort of presentation. I don't remember the specific numbers. It was very dismissive. And so I don't think she is actually going to take the audit very seriously. think the other thing is that NYU Policing Project, I think Melissa knows a lot more of the specifics, but they aren't necessarily the most neutral entity in the world for doing this. They have connections to these companies that police use, like the chief, the chief was on the advisory board, I believe through January at least. And so it's really hard to take this as a serious audit. And, you know, at the town hall, she talked about how, oh, well, we just didn't know anybody else who could do this audit. Someone from Stop Surveillance City emailed her like 14 different options in February. And I have a copy. They even wrote like a scope of work and all of these things that could be done that would be a serious like examination. But, you know, they just are just going with the entity that the chief is affiliated with, which is just nonsense. And I think the other thing is that do we even really need an audit to know that the data is available? No, because I've done a public records request. It's $1.25 to get data, right? So
$1.25. Huh.
Yeah.
Bigger than I thought. Okay.
Huh. Yeah, it's like, and so I think the thing is it's if you have the data, it is available. People can get it, whether it's public records requests, whether it's through subpoenas, whether it's through a data hack. I mean, it's there. Right. And I think it's nonsense to say, oh, we'll just have a good policy. I also honestly think that this is, you know, like, why hasn't she done much? Well, I don't think she's someone who's ever been in a position to have to worry about, you know, safety. I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, she's a white woman who's organizing around transit. So, like, has she ever really seen, witnessed, or experienced the type of, you know, things that I saw in Hungary? Or like, has she's not worried about Donald Trump deporting her, right? And so I think it's easy to be dismissive.
Maybe
about
should
this
be,
issue
but sorry.
Right, I don't know. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, Melissa, I don't know what your thoughts are.
No,
I think I do.
I will just add a little thought on the NYU Policing Project in that there were around 2022, I believe, there was a lot of scrutiny that was student-led, and community organizations also signed on to a letter that called out the NYU Policing Project for basically, like, I think, sanitizing and legitimizing, you know, these public safety that relies on increased weaponry for law enforcement and surveillance of poor, marginalized, and Black and brown communities. Right. And so they're not, you know, I think that the mayor said in the town hall and at other events that they're just like the gold standard for this kind of audit, and there's not really anyone else. And to me, honestly, that in and of itself is a red flag, that there's nobody else that can examine the way that tech operates in policing. You know, I'll add another fun fact about the NYU Policing Project. They were staffing like the board of Axon's AI ethics board. What? Yeah, they were associated with Axon's AI ethics board, which, you know, they will cite actually that they actually left and disbanded the board, and a bunch of board members resigned because Axon, I think it was 2019, but don't quote me on it, Axon decided they wanted to launch a new product that would, you know, solve mass shootings in schools. And that was building drones that had tasers mounted on them to stop the school shooter, and deploying those in every single school. And that was finally like the bridge too far for the NYU Policing Project. They said, like, okay, I don't think we can be associated with a company that thinks that is a reasonable response to school shootings.
That was a Black Mirror episode.
Uvalde, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a Black Mirror episode. I specifically
Sounds
remember
like
that
it.
in season 1. Yeah, no, like there's a drone and was hunting poor people with a taser.
Yeah.
Oh my
That,
god.
I mean, the Rick Scott, not to harp again on Axon
Yeah.
and the CEO, but he I think it was in a Fortune article, and it wasn't even like a criticism that I was reading, but he apparently views Minority Report as like a really great society and not a dystopic one. Like he thinks that that's a world like like in Minority Report, there's like the precogs that
Yeah.
can predict when someone's going to commit a crime so they can arrest someone before the crime
Right.
even happens. He thinks that's a success story, and that's what he wants to model the world after. So that's
Yeah.
worrisome.
It is.
And
It
Katie
is.
just says, well, Axon, military industrial complex, what can you do? That's the Katie's attitude towards this. I've heard her twice say that. And again, maybe
That's
it
shocking.
would comfort. It would be nice to have, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, that's disturbing. I mean, you know, I don't know, maybe we need to sit down and talk with the homie because so I will say one thing, that the even more disturbing thing is that on a national level we're seeing people like Peter Thiel, people like what was his name? Trump's toady, or Trump's Voldemort. Well,
Stephen Miller.
Stephen Miller. There you go.
I was going to throw Elon Musk in too.
Yeah, all of them not realizing that like the villains in fiction are villains, and particularly thinking about like how these very cautionary tales about tyranny and oppression somehow they find value in. But anyway, I could talk about that all night. But just to keep us on task here, and by the way, don't worry, y'all as guests can be as saucy as you want. Like that, that's great. I mean, again, this, journalism's about independence, and like if we're being honest, like let's say it plain. And what it sounds like that, you know, Mayor Wilson might not have been as, or at least the case that you guys are making, that Mayor Wilson was not as passionate and not as genuine about this as she should have been when she was this campaigner, Katie Wilson, on the campaign trail. And maybe this might be the moment where it's not just a, hey, I need you to push me so I can overcome all of these different constraints and show there's public support for this. But it might genuinely be a come to whatever insert deity moment that she might need to be like, oh, am I falling on the side of the baddies here? Am I not, not supporting? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny, like she said that, they don't use AI or facial recognition, right? That these cameras don't. Here's the thing. You can go to evidence.com, which is where all of this data gets uploaded. That's what police use. And my friend, who's a public defender, he was describing all of the different tools that are within it, right? That it can identify people within a video. It can create if you have multiple cameras, it can create a 3D map of things. And then I later Googled, and Axon brags about the AI capabilities of evidence.com, right?
Right.
And so, like, she's making these definitive statements without really even being fully informed, which is also disturbing. But like, it also doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that when you're dealing with the leader in police surveillance, right? So
Right.
of course, they're going to have all of this tech, and you have no guarantees. You have no way to prevent them from using the data they collect however they want. Like, you just don't. And so why pretend? Like, I would honestly rather say that she didn't care that our data was available to Donald Trump, because that's honestly the truth. She just doesn't want to say that. She just wants to pretend that sitting here looking annoyed in a meeting is enough to say that she's an organizer socialist as a mayor, but it's not true.
I think another thing that has concerned me is the focus on just the 62 surveillance cameras that, she kind of mentions that, saying that we're not as surveilled as a lot of other cities out there. But she's not talking about the Fusus product that we have, which is also Axon. Axon, I think, purchased Fusus, and Fusus allows residents and businesses to register their own cameras with SPD, and there are actually 771 registered cameras, and there's 573 integrated cameras. I'm assuming, based on like my tech background knowledge, that an integrated camera means that they actually have access to that camera feed if they were to, access it. I don't know. There's not enough information publicly like available on that site for me to assess what is going on with that. But those are all part of the real-time crime center too. So when she says it's just 62 cameras, that's not the case. And then we have the body cams on all of our police, which are also brought to you by Axon. So Axon really is building, I mean, they call it like the operating system of policing. And that's, I think, another big point or a sticking point for me, especially knowing kind of the tech world. I'm very concerned about the lock-in kind of factor. Like this is, they're installing, hardware across the city. There's, they're providing the tasers. They're providing VR headsets for police to train in using the tasers. They're providing the actual training. Like they are all like SPD is very
integrated ecosystem.
Integrated into this, and that's their plan. Actually, Axon, I've listened to the earnings call, their most recent earnings call too. They are planning to triple or double their revenue by 2028 from $3 billion to $6 billion. And the way that they plan to do that in big part is getting their existing customers to sign on to as many of these new AI-driven, products that they have to offer. And I don't know how we're going to actually push back against that. And the last thing I'll say around that is I did try and dig into the contracts. I don't know. It's pretty cumbersome. So I'm not positive on this, but everything that I've found on a line item that's an evidence.com storage fees related item, it's either priced at $0 or it's priced at a very low price, maybe like a few $100 or something for the year. That is not a realistic cost. So when the mayor said at the town hall that it's like cost prohibitive to try and do something, I'm not suggesting that the city should host it on their own servers, but that would cut out some of that would be maybe a real compromise, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I appreciate all the information. And actually, I'm looking at evidence.com now, and it's kind of miraculous how easy it is to get into it if you have the right, if you're already registered. But you actually, Melissa, you already started to answer the next question, and we're running out of time. So the next question was going to be how, like, let's say you guys one of you were in Mayor Wilson's position tomorrow and could abandon the cameras. How would it happen? But I do want to, I would be remiss if I didn't skip to another question that I know community wants me to ask. And it's a hard question. So I apologize in advance, but recently I'm sitting here in Columbia State Theater. I've lived in South End most of my time here in Seattle. I know Sochi, you have connections to South End. You've organized throughout here. Melissa, I know that you'd probably feel heavily about this as well. But the hard reality for a couple of community members that I've talked to about this, and I've made some of the points that you have, but two young folks were shot and killed pretty recently. And those community members who were impacted by that or knew who were impacted by that, they've said that, well, surveillance is a good thing. Either it makes them feel safe or somehow they feel like it could have prevented this. And also there are community members in the CID who have, asked for expansion of CCTV cameras really quickly. And I don't want to end on this question, but what would you say to them? Because, yeah, that's a hard thing. Yeah.
One, I would want to say I'm so sorry to anyone who's experienced that level of violence that touched them or their family. That is in no way something that I think should be dismissed. It's a real terrible thing that people go through, and it's something that the city needs to take seriously and solve. I think the thing that I'm sure that many people would agree with this, is that we need to invest in solutions that have been proven to work. And the solutions that have been proven to work are things like investing in, housing, investing in violence prevention programs. There's a lot of different community interventions that the city could be putting money into instead of cameras that would both prevent and address violence. I think the other thing is that the SPD has shown, and there is no evidence that shows, that cameras are the only way to solve crimes, right? And there is no one involved with this campaign that thinks that we should not be prioritizing this issue. If anything, our rally tomorrow is about community, not cameras. Instead of putting millions of dollars into the military-industrial complex, how about the city put millions of dollars into the South End? And I think that is what I would say.
Right on.
Yeah, and I might only add that I think, if we're putting this money into more SPD operated and controlled cameras, it's money that we're not able to put into other things. And I think I think we're all we all have the same goals. We want a safer, more affordable and better Seattle that we can all enjoy. And I think we're just maybe not agreeing on the approach to get there.
Absolutely. Community, not cameras. I think many of us can agree with that. And so if someone wanted to attend your protest tomorrow, where would it be?
City Hall, right in front of City Hall. We're going to have tamales. So, come eat a tamale, listen to a lot of great speakers, and join us in saying that we want to invest in community, not cameras.
And learn more about the issue from the people that we've put together for tomorrow.
I love it. And unfortunately, I had a couple more questions for you, but we've run out of time. Love to have you all back. Hopefully, we'll see you tomorrow or sometime soon. And with that, thank you guys for joining us. Xochitl, Melissa dropped so much knowledge. And, if you are curious, I'm sure you can find Our Seattle, Our OUR online. And also, we have a very busy April. And we were off last week, but in this next couple of weeks, we're going to bring you comedians. We're going to bring you other activists, all in leading up to something really special on May Day, which I hope to have for all of you. Also, special shout out to the burner that is 1 year old today, Hannah Krieg, friend of the show. Hopefully she and the folks that support that publication and are celebrating right now. So with that, stay awesome, stay righteous, and stay courageous.